You're listening to the Dyslexia and Me podcast. I'm your host, Laura Gowers, a global dyslexia assessor, coach and strategist, and a former Senko with over 23 years experience in education. This podcast is a space for honest, real-life conversations about dyslexia, the late discoveries, the relief, the frustration and the clarity that comes from finally understanding how your brain works. Join me and my expert guests for real conversations that matter. This is Dyslexia and Me. So today I'm joined by Dan Batchelor. Dan grew up in West Sussex and was diagnosed with dyslexia at college. He went on to graduate with a 2-1 in sports science. Dan is a primary school teacher, a storyteller, and someone who believes in the power of reading. Dan published his first book this year and is already planning the sequel. Hello, Dan, and welcome to the podcast. You found out you were dyslexic at college. Looking back, did that change the way you understood yourself and your earlier school experiences?
It was quite significant. Just to give you a bit of background on me as well, I'm also an identical twin. Chris is not dyslexic. It's weird. He's right-handed. I'm left-handed. He's really good at spelling, very quick reader. Growing up through school, we were always, as you would, I mean, everyone compares himself to everyone anyway, but being an identical twin, we were always compared. So for me, like in English and other aspects of the curriculum, I always sort of felt like thick one because I found spelling tests really hard. Reading out loud was always like something I sort of enjoyed doing because I've sort of like been centre of attention, but also hated it because I would always trip over words. So this is all only on reflection as well. It's quite tricky. But then, in a media lesson in college, I was reading out loud because we had to. And like, honestly, I was stumbling over every word. It like genuinely sounded like I couldn't read. It was awful. The teacher asked me to stay behind and I said to him, I promise I can read. I actually quite enjoy reading. And he was like, no, I don't think you can't read. I think you might be dyslexic. And then, a week later, got the test. Passed with flying colours. Everything after that really started making quite a lot of sense to me and sort of how I learn and why things were the way they were. Because I always felt like I tried hard. It was just some things didn't come as naturally to me. That's what it felt like at the time anyway.
Yeah, so I guess that really changed how you viewed your younger self when you reflected back.
Yeah, massively. Like I say, I just found things hard. And it generally wasn't like a lack of effort or a lack of wanting to be good at it. It's just the things, obviously now as a teacher as well, you can see the things that are priorities in school, and a lot of the things that are not set up well for people with dyslexia or other learning differences. And especially with having the book published last year and book 2 being signed and getting published next year, it's been a real time of reflection for me on how I got to this moment. And a lot of it does stem from that diagnosis, but anything before that, it all just makes way more sense looking back than it did at the time.
It was really impactful having that diagnosis. So you went on to university to study sports science. And what helped you succeed academically despite the challenges that dyslexia can bring? Did you have particular support from university?
Do you know what? Not really, but it's kind of funny because of the timing of my diagnosis as well. So, because I was older, I was 17 or 18 when I got diagnosed. I'd already gone through education without any extra support. The university was great. Loved my time there, but I wouldn't say I got any extra support because of dyslexia. Like I always see things online as well, like, dyslexia's can be a superpower. Like, don't buy into that. I think it's important to know that it can be a hindrance in a lot of things as well, and it's a difference. In some ways it could be an advantage. In other aspects, it's a hindrance. But in terms of university, I think what dyslexia gave me was certain superpowers like resilience, having to work harder, putting in extra hours. So I think when I had the later diagnosis, I'd already sort of had tools to cope with it. But in terms of what uni provided, I got the laptop and all that stuff, but there wasn't like targeted support, I wouldn't say, unfortunately. It would be useful though going forward for people.
And I'm totally with you on the superpowers with dyslexia. I don't think it it should be referred to as a superpower. I think it takes
No.
away the fact that there are difficulties there, and I feel as though it dismisses those. Yes, every person has got strengths. Yes, let's, like you say, let's use those strengths and use that as a superpower, but just to refer to it as a superpower condition,
Yeah.
I'm not really with that.
No.
And you've always loved stories and media. So how did dyslexia shape your relationship with reading when you were younger?
Oh, I've got to say as well, with university, I do think one of the reasons I picked my course was because of dyslexia and my relationship with education. Going backwards, I feel like a sport was something I could do without like having to really try. So I think that's why I always put myself in that box rather than thinking, oh, I could be a writer or I could be, whatever, this type of person. So I think the writing, that kind of happened by chance. It actually started writing before I was a teacher. I just sort of fell into a job out of university, I just genuinely found it boring. And I felt like I'd always been creative. Like at school, I always enjoyed art. Again, it's a subject that I never felt any pressure in. I always enjoyed the idea of like, movies, for example. Always loved the idea of being creative. And then it was just a case of like, one day came up with this story, and I thought, oh, that would actually be really interesting, and maybe you'll get a chance to read it, or maybe a listener will, and they might agree. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to give it a go. And then I started writing, and it was just on and off to begin with, and then it became more and more of a bigger part of my life. But I was really lucky because, like I say, my brother, who he did English literature at university, so he is good at that type of thing. He helped with the editing afterwards. My mum, my dad, my wife, everyone had proofread it before I started sending it off. So I think what I learned was that it wasn't dyslexia that was stopping me from writing. It was not having the idea. I think the message I try and send to the children I teach and to anyone is like, if you've got an idea, that's the part. Then there's now so much technology out there to help you with whatever spell check, whatever it might be, sentence structures, that it shouldn't hold you back. Like, it just gives you a different style. So for me, I'm not quite a visual learner. People that have read my story in the reviews say a lot of it reads like a movie, and you can really picture it. So maybe the way I think has come across quite well in my writing. Whereas, again, for me, when I read a book that's really, really descriptive and like beautifully written, I get lost in it quite quickly because I can't picture it and I can't see it. And it just becomes lots of nice words in an order, but it doesn't actually have any meaning behind it for me. So I think it's just given me a bit of understanding of how, people see stories and read it and interpret it.
Yeah, and that's quite a common theme with people with dyslexia that I've experienced in my career in education, is that a lot of people prefer to actually watch like a film adaptation first so that they can really visualize it before then reading the text, especially at
Yeah,
GCSE with those literature texts. They're very sort of heavy going traditional texts.
yeah.
Yeah, so you made a big career change into primary teaching. What drew you into the classroom, and how do you think your own dyslexia influences the way that you teach?
Yeah. Well, I always thought about being a teacher and wanted to be. Yeah, I didn't get around to it straight out of university, but then came back to it. I got quite lucky with my path into teaching. I started out doing PE and then moving into the classroom, which was always the plan. But I think for me, with dyslexia and how I am in the classroom, it's not how I'm different to the children. Like, you always want to be a mentor and supportive and push them and build resilience. I think, like, for me, it's like your own values and how you can put that forward. So, for example, spelling tests used to be part of the week that I hated because I couldn't do well, or I didn't do well, regardless of practice. But more importantly, even if I did do well, a few weeks later, if you asked me the same spellings, I would probably get them wrong because I was just learning to pass a test, which is completely pointless. Um, so I really want to have meaning in what I'm teaching and make it meaningful and for children to understand why they're doing something as well. So, I really want them to be creative, and when they're writing, not have to worry about, perfect punctuation, perfect spelling, even missed words or anything. Like as a writer, that happens in the editing process. So it can happen in the classroom as well. It's just trying to let them flourish and find their strengths. But it is difficult. I work at a school that really values well-being, and it puts it really high up. So I think we're a bit ahead of the curve on that. But I do think the school system at the moment and across the country is not well set up for children with dyslexia, and I don't really understand why, because in most schools and classrooms, well-being now is considered really high, and in PSHE and everything, we're always thinking about that. Yet I think dyslexia is a bit behind, and something that I'm quite passionate about and really trying to push forward.
Yeah, that's it. Because the education system really measures success in a very narrow way. So how do you think children with dyslexia can protect their confidence and their sense of self within the system that we currently have?
I think even without dyslexia, it's like understanding what is important and not important. I think parents' understanding is a big one as well. Parents want what's best for their children, obviously, and can worry about the spelling test, and if they're not doing well, seeing that as a measurement, like you say, of success. It's not. It's a measurement of 10 random spellings. So I think it's really hard because there's so much undiagnosed dyslexia. So, like you said there with the question, how can a child with dyslexia protect themselves? Well, I think once you've got the diagnosis, it becomes a lot easier because you've got that reasoning, and parents as well will be able to do their own research and understand how it is a difference. And yes, like we said earlier, it can be a challenge, but it's not a sign of intelligence. It's just a difference. I think it's the undiagnosed dyslexia and those ones who find it really hard. Because for me, like I said, growing up, I wasn't diagnosed. So I did feel stupid. I did feel like the thick one. And I think most people would have seen it that way as well. Whereas if I had the diagnosis at an earlier date, I probably would have thought much differently. So I actually think getting the diagnosis is a big step towards solving it. I think inside the classroom, then it becomes about culture and what you value really, and why you got into the job, because you want to find children's strengths and really make them passionate learners, because primary in particular, you want them to experience as much as possible so they can make their own minds up.
That's it, because you really focus on developing that love of learning and that culture of learning at primary, in the hope that it will continue through education. But
Exactly.
I agree that a diagnosis can provide so much clarity to the child, but also to the parents, because they can then really know, they may feel frustrated with why is my child not picking this up. On Tuesday he can seem to get it, and then on Wednesday it's like he hadn't covered it at all on Tuesday.
Yeah, no, I know it's frustrating, and also because it is sort of in the mainstream news a fair bit, and there's loads of examples of really successful, famous people who had the barrier of dyslexia, and it obviously didn't hold them back. Yet, like I say, in schools, it just seems a bit behind. And the bit that frustrates me as well is, for example, the SATs in year 6. You've got a spelling test at the end of it, which is essentially 20 random spellings that you've had 7, 8 years of learning and trying to create that love of learning. Like, it makes no sense to me that all of that hard work is judged on something as trivial as spelling. It doesn't mean you're a creative, amazing writer. It doesn't mean you can do anything meaningful. Yes, you can spell well, but I think it's unfair that a child could be judged in that way. And I also think you wouldn't do it in any other subject. Like you wouldn't do it in PE, where you put everyone up against each other and do the same race, or you wouldn't do it in science or anything like that. So I think there's a big area for development within schools and how it is assessed and judged.
Yeah, and that's it. And with spellings, I mean, in reality, as you progress through education and get into the workplace, it's very rare that, I mean, we've got all sorts of devices now that you don't really, as an adult, you don't really need to be able to spell accurately, because if you type in, the spell check's going to pick it up.
For children who are like beautiful writers, like unbelievably creative and can really draw these amazing stories out. And also, I'd say maybe one or two or three words are spelt incorrectly, but they're sounded out, so it's still really easy to read because all the sounds are there and it's what they see. You wouldn't be able to mark that or consider it as greater depth, whatever it's called, because the spelling's so inaccurate. And I think it's a bit of a shame that, like you said, with all the tools and everyone knows how the world works now, that's still such a big part of schools.
You often tell the children in your class that once you've learnt to read, you can read to learn. What do you wish more adults understood about how important that moment is for dyslexic learners?
Well, I think for me that any learner, there's no substitute for reading. If you and I wanted to learn something new, we would go online, we'd research, we'd read, we'd get there. Might take longer, might not take longer, but you just, there is no substitute. It's just how you get there, and it is proven as the only real gap closer in education is reading. So my message to parents would be to have that genuinely in the front of your mind. You see lots of people worry about homework and doing more writing and doing whatever, but if you're genuinely reading every day, then that is making a difference. And like I said, for me, that might mean reading a chapter, or it might mean even reading a couple of pages and having to take my time to understand it. For my brother, it might have meant flying through 100 pages. It doesn't really matter. That's up to you how much you do and how much you can do in that moment and on that day as well, because that changes. I just think if you have that as and you believe it as well at the front of your mind that right, reading is the one, that is what I'm going to put my energy into. I just think lots of the really important gaps get closed.
What type of practical support would you say would really make a difference day to day for a child with dyslexia at home and in school? So we've said about the reading, and obviously with reading that can be paired reading as well, works really well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Is there anything?
That's a good point, actually, with the reading. Like you just said there, it's not just giving them a book and saying sit there for 20 minutes and reading. It could be like say parent read a page, child read a page. Some days it might be just parent reading, but just having that constant exposure to books is massive. And in terms of practical stuff at home, I think is really hard. I think obviously picking the right books and maybe even having audio books in the background as they're reading along, just trying different things to make it as comfortable and fun as possible, because a big barrier to reading with someone with dyslexia is it's not fun because it is a challenge. So trying to get over that barrier first and then try different things. In schools, it's really hard because you see lots of things like spelling maths and that type of thing. And the reality is, I don't know, everyone has their own opinion. I'm not sure how helpful they are. I think so much of the support comes from how you treat people and how you see it and how you value education, and then all that other stuff becomes not as important. I think in schools there needs to be a change, and I think at home it is just trying to remove that barrier of, oh, you need to be sat down and read in 20 minutes a day. It's okay, this is a part of the day to look forward to. We're doing it together. It's going to be fun. And trying to really make it as immersive as possible.
Yeah, I agree. And building up that confidence in the child, confidence and self-esteem is so important. I think that can take children so far in education, even when they're finding it really difficult, but having that kind of resilience and that confidence to plough on and find their own ways to get to things.
Exactly. I completely agree. If I was an adult now who hadn't written a book or hadn't been doing this podcast, I probably wouldn't have sat and reflected as much. I realise a lot of my strengths come from having dyslexia, but I wouldn't say dyslexia is one of the strengths. I'd say that actually gave me lots of barriers, but the fact you're able to overcome them, that's the bit that, you can celebrate and really enjoy and understand and give you confidence to take on other challenges. But that comes from, years of hard work, really.
So for adults listening who suspect they might be dyslexic but were never assessed, what would you want them to hear from your own experience?
I would say if you believe you are, I'd say it's worth trying to get an assessment because it will help your own understanding. And even if you're not, and you just have a lot of the traits of someone that is dyslexic, it's just to be educated on it. Because again, like moving into education and writing is when I started really taking it more seriously, because at 17, diagnosis to me at the time just looked like a free laptop with me and my brother going to university. It wasn't until I actually spent time researching it that I realised, oh, that's why, I'm quite a visual learner, and that's why I tackle problems in a certain way, and that's why I think differently to, like I say, my identical twins. If you think it will help you get the assessment, it's worth being knowledgeable about what it means, because, like I say, it's not a superpower, but there are lots of useful traits. We want to live and learn in a world of different neurodiversities, because it gives you that broad classroom where everyone does think differently. So just try and understand how and why you think the way you do.
So it's so important. So if there is one message you'd want parents listening today to take away, what would that be?
I would say to think what you value in your child's learning. What is it that you want them to achieve? Because obviously everyone thinks, and it is, the sky's the limit for any child, but it's how can you get there? Not just parents or schools. It's taking away that pressure of the spelling tests and the obsession of that. Really focus on the reading, and just remember as well, working hard. If you're something that is a genuine barrier, doesn't mean you're going to, be able to smash through that wall or jump over it. Quite often it means that that's actually using up a lot of energy and taking up a lot of the child's mental capacity. So, by removing those barriers, actually you can focus the energy elsewhere on things that are actually more important to that child as well. So, again, it's just really having that understanding.
Such an important point. So, Dan, it's been fantastic talking to you today. Finally, can you just tell our listeners how they can connect with you?
Of course. So you can visit the book's website, which is www.jackpalmerseries.co.uk. You can find me on Instagram, which is danbatchelor.author. And then you can get the book Jack Palmer in Waterstones, Amazon, anywhere. If you do get a chance to read it, please do reach out through the website on my Instagram, because I'd love to hear your thoughts.
That's fantastic. So thank you, Dan.
No problem. Thank you.
Go and connect with Dan. All of the links are in the show notes. Go and check him out. Thanks to everyone that's tuned in for today's episode. Please don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast, and I'll see you all again next time.